Yeah. Good afternoon. In this topic today, I will discuss about the concept of what is a constructor, what is the destructor, and in the constructor, what are the types of constructors, and we discuss about these topics about constructors and what is the constructor and where we have to use the constructor and what are the types of constructor and what is the destructor and what is the purpose of the destructor. Okay. Let's try to understand what is the constructor first. What is the constructor? A constructor is a special function which is defined inside a class, which is defined inside a class. Its name look like the name of the class, name of the class. So here I give one example. I'm writing one class. The class name is the student. Okay. In the class, we already aware that what the class contains. The class contains the member data and methods as functions. So by default, every class data is private. And by default, every function is the public. So I will declare here data as a private. So we have to understand the concept, what is the public and what is the private and what is the protected. When you say any data, for example, if you say here int A or int serial number or the roll number, I can say this is the private data. What is the meaning of the private? This data can be used by only the specific class. It cannot allow access by the other classes. So whenever you define any data under the private, that will be restricted to the specific class only. It cannot be accessed by the other classes. And here, what is the constructor? The constructor is nothing but one type of function which we declared inside the class. And I already told the constructor name and the class name both are the same. Here the class name with the student. So I will use the same name as a function name also. So what is the purpose of this one? The constructor will see. I'll say here give message object added. Object added. And then I'm calling the constructor and calling the class. So when you see this one, my class student contains one member data, which is a private, and one constructor, which will help us to display the message. Okay. Now, when you say the private, it should not allowed to access by the outside the class, as we said. That's why if you say public here instead of the private, we can able to access data outside also. So now the question, sir, how do you access the data which is the private inside a class to the outside? That can be done with the help of functions only. So whatever the functions you are defined inside the class, with the help of those functions, we can able to access the member data also. So for this purpose, I'm writing one function called void data. I will give some function name, void data. What this function will do, I will set the function, will set the value as 12. So whenever you call the data, what will happen? It will set the value for the roll number is 12. And here I'm using one more function display. So when you call this function, I'm asking to display value of R number. So when you see this one, what we can understand, my class contains private type member data and public type one constructor and one function for giving the data and another function for output the data. And finally, I'm closing the class. So this is the class. You have to understand clearly. Here, meaning of the private is nothing but the data cannot access outside the class. So if you want to give the access of this data outside the class, we need to use the functions. That's why I'm defining one function data, which will help us to give values for the data, right? Now, once the class is defined, what I have to do? I have to use the main method. So how to write the main method? Int main, and I'm writing the code here. So once I have created the class, if you want to access the data inside the classes, if you want to access the methods inside the classes, we need to create the objects. So how do you create the object? First, we have to mention the class name and followed by the name of the object. Here, S1 is the object, is the object of class student. Class student. Right? So this is the object of the class student. Now, I have defined the object. So what is the concept of constructor? The constructor is a special function which can be defined inside the class and it has the same name like a class name. And one thing you have to remember, whenever the object is created, automatically the constructor will be invoked. Means it will come into the action. So what is the code we have written in the constructor here? Displaying a message that object added. So when this constructor will be invoked, whenever you create the object, automatically we'll get the message that object added. Now, what is the next one? I want to access the data. Where the data is accessing here with the help of the function called data. I will say here s1 dot data. Simple. What we'll do when I call this one, the object s1 call the method data which is already created at the student class. Now, I will say here s1 dot display. Simple. So the first statement will create the object. The second statement, with the help of the object, we are calling the method of the class. The second again, we are calling the method of the class with the help of the object. The simple program that understands the concept of constructor. So, sir, how I have to need to create the constructor? Because they will help us to initialize the objects. What the main idea of this one? Constructors means constructors will initialize like the objects. Initialize the objects. Now question, sir, how many constructor I can able to create for the class? There is no restriction. You can create any number of constructor for the class. But the logic you have to understand is no constructor should be of the same method, same model. So what is the meaning of this one? I will show you. If I define one constructor with the name here, the student, and like this, you cannot use the same like this again. Because these two constructors are looking similar. This will not be permitted. Then how can you define? We can define like this. How can you define? I can say int a. This will be allowed. Otherwise, if you want to use a float, a. So what will happen? This is a constructor without having any parameters here. where this is the constructor with the parameters. So this can be acceptable. Likewise, you can create n number of constructors. So I will show one more example. I will remove this one. Take one more example. Here I'm creating one class. What you can say, adding student, the class, I'm creating one class. The class name is addition, is my class. So inside this class, what you have to define first? I have to define the data in the private mode. So why you are always define the data in the private mode? Because the data should be in privacy. I will say here roll number and int marks 1, int marks. So now I have to define the methods. So for the purpose of method, to explain the purpose of the data. So for this, I am writing one method that is called constructor. I will say addition. So as I told already, the function name and the class name should be same for the constructor, right? So here I'm saying that int r, comma, int m1 or int m1 and int m. If you want to get confusion, I will say marks 1. Here the marks 2. Okay. Now, what is the meaning of this one? I am creating one constructor with the 3 parameters which are r, m1, m1, m2. What the purpose of the constructor? They will initialize the objects. Now, what I will do, I will give the values for the. So I will give re numeric r marks 1 equal to m1 and marks 2 equal to m2. Right? One constructor completed. Now again, I am creating one more constructor. I will copy this one and paste here. But this time what I will do is, I will change the order this one here. I will say m1 first. Next to r, next to m2. Right? Next I will say here m1 first the value. I will give one m1 first. So what you can understand, here I can able to create more than one constructor. But the logic is the sequence of parameter is varying here. In the first case, I am using R, M1, M2. Next, I am using M1 or M2. Next, you can use M2 or M1. You can use n number of combinations, whichever you want. So this concept we can call as the declaration of more than one constructor inside the class. See, here have the same name, here also have the same name, and class name is also the same. So this is called one constructor, this is called one constructor. If you are using more than one constructor in a class, that we can call as a constructor overloading. Clear, understand? So whenever you create more than one constructor inside the class, we can call them as a constructor overloading. So now the question, sir, you have created 2 constructors. When you execute the program, if I create the object and calling, which constructor will be invoked first? That's the question. That depend upon the values you are passing. See, that depend upon the values you are passing, it cannot understand. See here, I will create the main program here. I will say here the int, I'll say here int main. I'm creating main method. So in the main method, first what you have to do, you have to create the object. That's why I'm creating the object. What the class name here? Addition. For this addition class, I'm creating the object. Some add one is one object. Okay. So whenever you create the object as the principle of the constructor, what will happen? What will happen? It will be initialized. But the problem here is, I have 2 constructors here. That's why I have the confusion that which object, which construct has to be initialized. In that case, what you have to say is we have to specify the parameter values here. So what the value first I have given here? I will give some 20 or 21 is the roll number. Marks I will say 70. Second marks I will say 76. Now it can understand that he has calling some different method here. Right? Otherwise, you can do like this. I can say here we have the integer, right? In the place of integer, what I will do is I will keep here the I will erase this one. I will remove this one, and in this place I will write the different way that is called float. I will give the float here next. Float past. Okay. And obviously, what you have to do, you have to also remove here the M2 as a float. This should be the float. Right? So what we can understand first time, integer, float. Next I can say here integer, float, but different values. So like this, we can able to keep on changing the methods, whatever you want. Clear? So what I'm doing here, I'm creating one object here. I'm creating the main. Okay. In that one, I have to call the constructor. Before the constructor calling, I have to create the objects. So what the object name here? What the class name? Addition is the class name. I will say add one is the object. Okay. Whenever you create the object, automatically, what will happen? The constructor will be invoked and the values will be assigned. I will say here, clear? That's why I will give the values here. I will give 10, 67, and 65. So what will happen? Here the 67, 65 are the values for the M1 and M2, and 10 is the for roll number. So this way you can able to call the constructors. So whenever you have created more than one constructor in the class, that we can call as a constructor overloading. Welcome again. So first of all, what is the constructor? A special function that declared inside the class, which have same name like class. Clear? Okay. This we can call as a constructor. And they help us to initialize the objects of the class. We can use more than one constructor in a class. That causes for constructor overload. We can solve the problem by changing the sequence of parameters given for the constructor. Right? This is the concept we have to understand. A special function that we can define in the class, the same has its class name. They help us to initialize the object. We can use more than one functor, which can call as a constructor overloading. We can solve the problem by changing the sequence of the parameter for the given constructor, right? The example here is, I'm writing the example here. The example here is the class, I will say here the student, okay. Roll number, int roll number, string name, and float marks. So in this case, I have defined three member data values which can become as a private by default. Okay. Now we have to create the methods. So what is the method I'm creating? First, I have to create the constructor. So constructor name should be same as the class name. Okay. I will say here cout constructor created. Okay. This is the one constructor. Next, here I'm writing the next phase here, the next constructor. Here I'm writing the student, the second constructor. This time I am using the parameters r, comma, string names and float yeah. Okay, right. So this is one constructor I'm defining. So what I have to do, the purpose, initialize the objects. So what the value data I have here, r number equal to r, name equal to names, and what is called marks. Marks equal to that's it. What will happen? Whatever the values you are passing in the main function, they will be replaced in the class values, right? So I will create one more here. Again, student. This time I'm changing the sequence here. First, I will give the name. Then I will give the roll number. Then I will give the right. So I will give this time the name equal to names, r number equal to r, marks equal to 1. That's it. The class closing. I will give one more things, void display for displaying the output. Okay. So what the code I am writing here is the void display is cout. What we have to say here, values to be displayed. What are the values we are giving? R number, name, R number, name, and that's it. So I have defined the names also. Change the font size. Right? So finally, what I have to do, I have to close the class. I will close the class here. That's it. So I have created class with how many constructors? 3 constructors. One is the default constructor, 2 are the parameterized constructors. So now what I have to do, I have to define the main method. So I will go here, I will write the code here. Int main. Okay. For the purpose to create the object. For which one? The class student. I will give S1. Sorry, yes. So here S is S is object of student. Right? I will use this size. Right? Now what I have to do? So whenever you create the object, what will happen? It will look, there are 3 constructors are there. Okay. So it cannot understand which constructor has to call. What you have to do here, you have to check, are you passing any parameters or not? So here I'm not passing any parameters. So whenever you are not passing the parameters, by default, you take the default constructor. See, if you say here some values after the object name, it will call either this one or this one. If you say simply student, yes, what will happen? This will call the student here. Okay. Now, I will take one more example. Student, yes, this time give the parameter values 10. Some, for example, Raj, and his marks is 78. Right? What will happen here now? It will call the constructor. Which one? First is the integer value, the second is the string value, and third is the float. Which one this is? The first, the second constructor, which is the parameter. Let's say get 78.5 something. The same way, if you give one more constructor, student S2 of, this time I will give the name first, then the roll number second, and marks at the third. So then this case, what will happen? It will call the third constructor. So this way you can able to call the constructor whatever you want to do, right? So finally, I have created the which one? Finally, here I have created the constructors. Then what you have to do? You have to call the function to display the value. See, if I call this one, what will happen? This will come. Okay. The roll number will become 10, and name will become Raj, and marks will become this one. Okay. I need to get the values. So what I have to do here? I have to write one more statement here. I will write here only. Okay. What the one here? What the object name? S1 dot S1 dot display. That's it. S1 dot display. And finally, I will close the main. Finally, I will close the main. Okay. So this is the method to write the logic service programs. I will see. I'll change one second. Right. So this is the final draft. First, I have created the class with one constructor, two constructor, three constructor, and a display method to close the class, and finally call the method. This concept we can call it as a constructors overload. Now the question, sir, what is the destructor? Let's see in the next slide. I will remove this one. I will remove this one. I will keep this one, and I will remove this one. So in this case, what we will do here, as of now, we have created the constructor. Along this with the constructor, I am creating one more thing that is called the destructor. So how do you identify the destructor? There should be a small character that is called the tilde character before the destructor. And moreover, the destructor cannot have any parameters. I will say just simple message that object deleted. Object, that's it. And finally, what you have to do? We have to close the class. Until this and the matter. So in this case, see, in this case, whenever you call, in this case, whenever you call this main method, what will happen? Look for the default constructor. Yes, we will get the message the constructor created. Second one is S1, S2. S1, S2. So what will get here? S1 dot display. I'm asking S1 dot display. So in this case, what will happen when you say S1 dot display? What will happen? It will display, it will take the first object value 10 ROS 78.5, and it will display the values of them, and finally we'll get the message that object deleted. So if you say here S2 dot display, what will happen? We are given the same values. If you want to change the values, you can change them. For example, this name second time, actually the Hari and 12, and some say, for example, 87.3. So when you call this one, we'll get the message the constructor created. The second case, when you call this one, what will happen? S1 dot display. It will create the object and pass the parameter. It will create the S2 object, pass the parameter. It will call the display function for the object S1. This will create the display function called S2. So this is a simple concept of the writing the program, right? So if you want to execute this one, we can able to execute. I will show the code procedure also here. Now I will try to share my screen and we can able to go code blocks now. So now open the new empty file and copy the content here. So the class point of view, I have created one constructor and closing the class here. Then before that, as usual, we have to use hash include IOST and using namespace standing. These are the common points anyhow. So I have created one class with the private data and the normal method constructor method is there, and also one creating one more method that is called void display. Okay. So what is the purpose of this one? We get the values of roll number, name, and marks. That's it. I'm creating the closeness. The class point of is completed. I'm creating the main method here. For the main method, we have defined there. So we have to create the object. What I do here in the program, we see I have to say create first one. What is the class name? The student. The student, yes. First I have created one object. As I say student of, okay. If you want to pass the parameter, what you do is the parameter constructor, right? So I will use one more constructor here. The constructor name is uh, student student of int of string n comma float m. Okay. Now I will assign the values here. Say here r number equal to r and name equal to n and marks equal to m. Right? So what is the RMN? We are just passing the parameter values, whatever we passed, right? The construct is completed. Now here I'm creating one more that is called student S1 of, this is S class S1, this is S2. Okay. What are the values of passing? Integer. I will say 1001 is the roll number. Ras is the name. And you can say the double quotes also. Ras is the name. And here 45.6 are the marks. Okay. So I have created two objects, one with the default constructor, the second is the parameterized constructor. Now I am calling the display method. I will say display. So now we have the question, sir, why are you using for S2, why can't for S1? S1 I don't use any parameter values. If you want to give, you can give S1 dot display, S2 dot display. Try to save this file. Cons.cpp. I will overwrite it. Okay. Try to execute the program. What is going here? String here. So where you have to use a one more class that is called hash include. So here we have to see out. Sorry, by mistake, double quotes is there. Now use here the small letters of S here. And the student S1 is a private within this context because when we use the one thing, we'll make it as a public. We already told that we can't even directly access the values. Okay. So I will use this as a public. Now see here. The first case we get the message the constructor created, and the next we have the gap values of this one. So we'll do one thing. I will give the end ln here because the output will be very clean. Okay, here also I will create end ln for end line. Now you can see the first, whenever you create the first object, we are getting a message that object is constructor is created. And next case, see, next case is a garbage value. Why? Because we are not passing any parameter to the first object, but we are asking to display the output. See here, I'm asking to display the output in the main function. See for S1, but actually the S1 I don't give any values. That's why it doesn't require this one. Okay, that's why I will remove this one. Then it is very cool. Next, I will create one more thing that is called the destructor. How do you create a destructor? Just like a constructor. So I will give a message here. What is the message? See out object deleted. Right? That's it. Now re-execute the program. Where is the error here? Object created. Sorry, forgot double quotes. Now see this one. So first we are getting the values, the constructor created, next the values, the 1001 is the roll number and the name rows and the marks here, and finally object deleted. Okay. So why you get the two times object deleted? Because one for the S1 and second for the S2. Okay. So if you want to get the more clear options, again you have to create the handle for space. And in the same way, here you specify the space also if you require. When you display in the output, you can specify that space also. That will become more, will get more gap. Right? Now it will be output should be proper way. See clear. First, when we create the object, we can get the constructor created. Okay. Next one, the 1001, the roll number, the name and marks, and object created, object created. See here, we are getting the only one time at the constructor created because whenever you use the default constructor, only will get the message. Okay. Parameter constructor will help us to add the parameters. Clear? So this is the concept of using the concept of constructors destructor. Thanks for today. I will share the video in the group. If you want to see, you can able to see.